Welcome to the 95th episode of the Hail Married podcast. I'm Atoves, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to review our win over Temple. Let's get started. Undefeated at the Dome this season. Last time was 2021. Bowl eligible for the 5th year in a row, and the first game with over 50 points since Louisiana Tech in November of 2022.
I would not have guessed that at all, that we would get to this point after the Tulsa game.
Oh, I don't think anyone did, including Jeff Traylor.
I mean, this is all fantastic, getting to bowl eligibility, finding a way to get to bowl eligibility. I mean, let's be honest, like, some of these teams we played haven't been very good, and I knew that they weren't very good. Like, North Texas was not a very good team. This Temple team, not very good. But after Tulsa, you felt like nothing is off the table with this UTSA team.
Well, yeah, I mean, we lost to a very bad Rice and a very bad Tulsa team. So, yeah, you just didn't know.
So to get here, I'm grateful for the fact that they were able to find a way to do it. Obviously, it took them having to be undefeated at home in order to just be bowl eligible because they can't win on the road.
Right. I mean, there's a lot to unpack about the game. But before we get there, let's talk about Traylor's post-game press conference, because I feel like there's a lot to unpack just from some of the comments that he made.
Sure.
It was humorous to me that Traylor talked about how emotional he was really before the game, it being senior day. But then he was also just talking about in general the season and how he didn't expect to be here after, the Tulsa game. And he said that he is very emotional at home, but in front of his coaches, his bosses, the team, you got to keep believing and living the stuff you tell. If what we saw in press conferences and interviews this season was him keeping it together, whoa, I cannot imagine what he's like at home. And he mentioned that he's really emotional in front of Care Bear at home because, man, what we saw during press conferences and interviews was him really wearing his emotions on his sleeves a lot of times and his frustration on his sleeves. So I just found that statement humorous, ironic. I don't know.
Care Bear has to be the most patient woman in the world.
Right?
Because, there are moments. I mean, he is like sort of peak and valley, and that kind of matches what the team has been like.
Right.
So, but I found it interesting that you said that he said, and you quoted, keep believing and living the stuff you tell. We know that the team lives with the culture, but we're not sure that Traylor believes in it. It feels like it's a little telling there, right? Like that kind of peeks into maybe we were onto something when we were saying that.
Yeah.
And look, I'm sure that he wants to question the culture because he's not really sure that it matches maybe the team or this version of the UTSA Roadrunners. And I totally get it. But I feel like this is what you created. I mean, it's all over the race facility. There's no way they're going to take it down because you're like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm not feeling it this year. No, that's what you have to stick with. So, yeah, him getting a little emotional and stuff.
It just was, I don't know, very
pure Trailer.
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't even have words for it, okay? The other thing, though, that he said that I completely agree with was his first opening quote at the post-game press conference was, "It was a weird game, right? Very strange game." Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think he was 100% spot on there. The final score, 51-27, wasn't terribly far off from our predictions. I said 45-20, you said 52-14, but how we got there was just not what we expected. It was not as dominant of a game as I think the score would make you think it was, and it certainly wasn't a well-executed game.
It was not a well-executed game. I would say if you see it, take it in as a whole. If you want to, like, take it in parts, sure, there was dominance. And I'd love to brag by calling the 50 burger, but like you said, that path to it was just so odd. When I saw them score that final touchdown, and I was like, wow, I called it. I feel like I did more of my bragging at the game instead of, I just can't do it on here because I just can't honestly tell anyone that listens to this that, oh yeah, this is exactly how I saw this going. Because I really didn't. I really figured that there was going to be more efficient and better offensive execution than we saw, and then definitely I thought the defense would score a couple of touchdowns because the defense really was overwhelming this Temple offense.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people say it. I just really feel like you saw both teams on the field, and it was clear, crystal clear, just who was the bigger, faster, stronger team.
Sure. I really thought that Temple was going to get to the 20-something points more in like trash time. Like,
Right.
I thought we were going to
Right.
see the backups playing against, Temple starters. And I mean, that's probably true for maybe the last drive of the game. But man, when we got to a 1-score game in the third quarter, I was flabbergasted.
And there's a lot to it, and we'll get to it once we get into the offensive side of the ball. But, certainly I can tell you that it just wasn't – it just didn't feel like a cohesive team win. It felt like the defense carried us, and, I mean, they could only carry us so long. It was the season right here in this one game.
Yeah, and I think part of it maybe goes back to the other quote that I wanted to pull from Traylor's post-game. He said, "We played pretty conservative, honestly. We were going to take our field goals and not try to do anything to screw it up." Okay, first of all, why? And then second of all, if your game plan was to play conservatively, why all the trick plays?
Well, first of all, the why is probably because he's trying to learn from the lesson they learned at Tulsa, where they were quick strike, they were really aggressive, and they kind of left themselves open for more body shots, i.e. to the defense that was just struggling, right? Like it was just, but I just don't see it. Not from this Temple team. This Temple team just really struggles to move the ball, and you saw it when the defense held them to like 3 yards after the first quarter.
Right.
Like you saw the first drive, and I know I looked over at you and I was like, this is about how I thought it was going to go. Like this Temple team is not good at execution, but our mistakes throughout the entire game put us in a position, much like it has a whole season, where you can't provide distance between yourselves and your opponent. The second one part of it is why all the trick plays. It's just a trademark of him. Like he just feels like he has to, and it at times I think comes at the cost of offensive continuity. And obviously because it sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I go back to something Greg Lucas said. You could look at the play calling and break down every single play and say like, well, that didn't work. They should have done this. Mm-hmm. But I just never felt, and maybe this is why I really feel about the offensive continuity, because there's never really feels like you've done something to set it up. Like you've misdirected or you've done something else that you found from the Temple defense or the opponent's defense, whoever UTSA is playing, that you feel like you can pull it off. And maybe that's why you also were kind of scratching your head as well, because it's never really set up. It's just sort of, it's just puzzling. It is puzzling.
I mean, getting into the game, it was great, though, to see on senior night a lot of the seniors getting some really big plays. And I know we'll get more into those details later when we get to, breaking down the offense and defense. But, it's always exciting on senior night to see the seniors be the stars of the show.
It's the last time that they will play in the Dome. Like there's no bowl game that UTSA can qualify for that'll let them play in the Dome again.
Right. And there's no championship game potential.
Right. So, it's just a special night. You can see that everybody's really jazzed up for the game, and it's fun.
I mean, now that we've kind of talked about how odd this game was, I mean, one of the things that did make it exciting was there were several explosive plays throughout the game. I mean, Owen McCown had a 75-yard touchdown run. Robert Henry had an 88-yard run, and Chris Carpenter had a 97-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. I mean, just crazy, big, explosive plays that, honestly, we've been lacking this season.
If that's all you told me about this game, prior to the game, if this is all you told me, I'd been like, oh, yeah, that sounds right.
Well, and we scored 51 points?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I could see it. You're right. I mean, this sounds like we're going to dominate in all three facets of the game.
Right.
And I mean dominate.
But then there were the costly penalties and the costly mistakes, right?
You gave me the bud.
Yeah. Carpenter muffs a punt return. Ends up resulting in a touchdown from Temple. There's 2 interceptions thrown by Owen McCown. We missed a field goal. We have penalties that, once again, extend drives. Can't score in the middle 8. It just, these are the things, again, that we talk about. And I know I've harped on the middle 8, but we miss a field goal right before halftime. Then we have to settle for a field goal right in the first part of the third quarter. It's like, at the end of the day, there were so many things that worked in our favor, and we got the win, and we got bowl eligibility, but we're going to West Point this week. We can't play like this against Army.
Certainly not the jumping off point that you're hoping to get to.
Right.
It felt like after the last few games here at home that this one would be sort of crescendoing towards the finish, and okay, this is the team that we thought we would see at the beginning of the year. Instead, it just felt like, we just, like we've been harping around.
It was a weird game.
Yeah.
It was a weird game. And to end the game, we were kind of hoping maybe they were going to let the fans on the field like they have in years past. Right. I mean, obviously they didn't last year because the game ended after midnight. But that wasn't the case, so we get to bowl eligibility and we don't get the celebration on the field. It just kind of felt more like a exhale or a sigh of relief than it did like the celebration that you were kind of expecting. Now, some of us got on the field even though we weren't supposed to. And some of us might have got on the field with alcohol, even though we weren't supposed to. But while we were on the field, it still didn't have that celebratory feeling that you would expect from like, oh my gosh, we got to bowl eligibility. We did it. It was just kind of, I don't know. It just was this odd sort of feeling.
I think it fit with the way the game went. We've been talking about how weird it was and how odd. You're right. It's like somehow we got through this game and finally put it away, 51-27. It just, I mean, it was a weird game. But I do want to, real quick before we move on, I want to share the story about Robert Henry. As Atos has mentioned, we did get to go on the field, kind of strolled on there.
I did get to continue my tradition of getting some photos with players.
Right. And so our friend's sister wanted a picture with Oscar, and we were going over to Oscar. And actually, it was right around the area that Robert Henry was at. And some little boy had come up from the seating area and just over the rails had said, "Robert, can I get your shoes?" And Robert Henry's first reaction was like, "You want my shoes?" And he looks down like he's going to try to take them off. This is a man that's got his shoes, like his ankles, all taped up. There's no way he's going to get it off. But he looked down like, how do I get this done? My response to him immediately was like, "You're not going to get those off." Like,
there's no way.
I know what you're trying to do, but it's not going to happen. We need some heavy duty scissors to do that. And he kind of smiled at me and laughed. But the reason I'm telling the story is because we talk a lot about what a lot of these players do on the field and where they succeed and fail. And this was just a kind of really nice moment where it probably happens more often than we get to see. But for me to kind of see what his intention was, and a lot of players were giving to a lot of the kids, giving them their towels, giving them, their gloves. And I'm sure they've done that, like I said, throughout the season. But just to see that and, potentially influencing the future Roadrunners, in maybe 10, 15 years, it's just a small thing, but it's a really cool thing. So with that, let's go and talk about special teams.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think the story with special teams this game was just inconsistency.
Yeah.
I mean, I already mentioned it. You have, this high point of Chris Carpenter's kick return for a touchdown, second in program history, and his longest. I mean, he owns both of the two kickoff returns, but he, managed to pull off a longer one than his first one. But then you mirror that with the muff punt return. Then you see Chase Allen come out on senior day, really great. You get to see him make a field goal, but it's, right after we've seen Tate uncharacteristically miss a field goal at the end of the second quarter. Then you've got this onside recovery by Elliott Brow. It's just like you just kind of see these ups and downs, and it's like, for every good, there was almost another bad. And it was just sort of this roller coaster ride where you weren't sure what you were going to get. Like you just kind of felt like after the Carpenter punt return, and then you comes back with the kickoff return for a touchdown, I was like, oh, karma's restored, but not quite.
It just feels like that encapsulates the seasons, right?
Right.
Like that this season, we have seen these moments of brilliance from the team, and then these moments of
what just happened?
What happened?
Yeah.
What's going on? I don't know. Don't know what would make you think that was a good idea at that moment. And especially the muff punt. Even Andre Ware said it. It felt like he was really casual going up there, and maybe that's part of why we think it's weird, because maybe UTSA was overlooking Temple to a point,
right?
Or
you're just so emotional for it being senior night. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's several reasons that it could be. What it just wasn't was really focused play, and I think that's what led to all this, kind of yin and yang, peak and valley, whatever you want to use. It was just so odd.
And then on the Temple side, man, I know I talked about like the average punt for the Temple punter, but I guess what I didn't realize, and maybe I missed in watching the other games, was that, when I say that he had a 40-yard average, apparently it's like a 20-yard punt, 20-yard roll.
Well, I mean, he was getting some big time punts off in that game, and I don't know, it fit with the game.
Right. The one thing, though, I will say is I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see some like 65, 67-yard field goal attempt from the Temple kicker, because, we know that he's made a 64-yard field goal attempt out in the elements, and you thought this would be kind of that perfect situation where he's in a dome and he's going to have this really great attempt, but, it just seemed like the times where Everett Withers could have gone for a field goal, he didn't. So,
all right, let's get to the defense. One of the keys to victory there was take away Dante Wright. It's sort of a mixed bag here, Atos, because he has 5 receptions for 128 yards. He had 14 in their win against FAU, 2 touchdowns. So, okay, we held him less than, in single digits, but you could also say 40% of those receptions were touchdowns. And they were, so it was one of those moments where I was like, every single time I saw Dante Wright, either in motion or getting free, it's like, do they not listen to the pod, or are they not listening to Jess Lepp? I don't think that Jess Lepp wanted to let him get free like that.
Sure.
And especially on the one he burned Denver Harris on. I mean, Denver just kept looking into the backfield, but I think Denver was also thinking that he could make up that speed and catch up with him.
Probably.
It really wasn't the case, though. That just wasn't what was going to happen, because Dante Wright is a pretty good athlete. And really, talking about sort of this mixed bag with Dante Wright, you had continued issues with the penalties. You mentioned it before. There's 4 of them that extended drives by giving Temple a first down, and it just continues to mount. Like we just seem to have at least 3 or 4 penalties on defense that extend the drive for our opponents.
Yeah, and even when they're not extending the drive for the opponents, then you had, Zay Frazier, he gets his second interception in the game, and it's immediately followed by a personal foul by Danye. And so then it just sets our offense back.
Right.
So we're hurting ourselves either way.
It's just undisciplined play that I think the frustrating part about it is that we expect our coaches to have addressed this by now, and they just don't address it. Hence why we keep picking on the coaches and saying, why are we still making these mistakes? We shouldn't be making these mistakes at this point. You should have said something or corrected something in practice to get them out of this sort of fixation with having to commit this, especially with Danye. He just seems to like personal fouls.
But let's talk about some of the good things that we did see from the defense.
Okay.
We, like I mentioned a second ago, we extended our streak of consecutive games with the takeaway to 21. This time again, we have Zay Frazier with 2 interceptions in this game. And we had a fumble and fumble recovery. So this season, we now have 9 fumble recoveries on the season and 10 interceptions, which is just absolutely incredible.
Well, when you play aggressively, you're going to give yourself a chance to create some turnovers, and especially against a team like Temple, I would have expected some more turnovers, honestly.
Right. Jamori Robinson posted 7 tackles, including 5.5 for a loss, 4 sacks. He broke the single game tackle for loss record of 4.5 set by Robert Singletary against FAU way back in October of 2014. And he tied the single game sack standard set by Marlon Smith versus McMurray way back in September of 2011.
The second game ever played by UTSA.
Which earned Jamori the American Conference Defensive Player of the Week.
This defensive line was living in the backfield of Temple, especially like just throughout the game. As a unit, they played so well. And I told you, like, this is a bad rushing offense, and there wasn't a very good just offensive line overall. Like, so I knew that they would be able to have opportunities. The question is, was UTSA going to be able to take advantage of it? And I mean, I'd say as a whole they did, but Jamori it just felt like every single time Evan Simon was scrambling, it was Jamori Robinson that was coming behind him. Hey, I'm with you, Evan. Like, I know he won't listen to this, but I can guarantee you that I'd be running for my life too if I had Jamori Robinson, like,
chasing you,
accelerating towards me.
Absolutely. Zay Frazier, we already mentioned his 2 interceptions. He also had a pass breakup, a hurry, 2 tackles. Zay is now the school record holder at 6 interceptions this season, eclipsing Clifford Chapman's previous mark of 5 from 2022. This is the 2nd straight game and 3rd overall game this season that Zay had 2 interceptions.
I feel like he got tested quite a bit. I think everybody was looking at, I think quietly, Denver Harris has had a nice year. Nobody really wants to throw his way. And because of it, it feels like they need to test Zay. And Zay has benefited greatly from it.
Right.
And to me, I think Zay is probably coming out of here being probably in one of the best cornerbacks that we've ever had.
Right.
And, you asked me on Sunday, what are your thoughts on his like pro prospects? And it's like it's odd to not want to take a chance on a guy that is, while tall, 6'5", he has good speed. His coverage ability is very good, and he's so athletic that he can make up even when he gets beat. That second interception, I told you, like, he got beat bad on that one by Dante Wright, but the thing that Zay did well, in my opinion, was that he looked for the ball and he played the ball and looked for it, as opposed to just going straight towards Dante Wright and playing the man. And that, A, kept them from getting a pass interference, but B, and I think most importantly, gave him a chance for the interception. Like, he did put himself in that position, and that's, to me, is underrated from a lot of cornerbacks. Like, I don't think a lot of cornerbacks do that, let alone UTSA cornerbacks.
Right. And then just looking at his body control on several of those interceptions,
Yeah.
I mean, especially the first one, just his body awareness to stay with a foot in bound and maintain control of the ball. I mean, that's, like you said, it's really underrated, because you think it's easier than it is, but I'm sure it's extremely hard. And it's likely going to be one of the things that helps him get more looks from NFL scouts.
A lot of us in our dreams think we could do what Zay did in that first one, but let me tell you, contorting yourself the way he did, nah. Zay is, I think those plays like that, especially that first interception, are what I'm going to really remember about Zay, in the coming seasons when he's no longer here, because that's the stuff we're going to miss.
Right. Some of the other seniors that had really phenomenal nights: Martavius French, Jamal Ligon, Brandon Brown. I mean, you talked about seeing like Jamori kind of all over the place. I felt like every time I looked up, if it wasn't Martavius French, it was Jamal Ligon, making some kind of tackle or a play on the ball.
the linebackers just have been playing really well this back half of the season. I mean, sure, the competition's not as stiff, but especially against like a team like North Texas, and then coming to having to play up for a Temple team, I thought they did just a really good job. And Brandon Brown has just been a menace on the defensive line. Like this defensive line has always been very good, and it's been good for a while. They had Rod Wright at the beginning of the Trailer era, and now you go over here to Sadiq Haynes, and it's just they just continue to play well. And I think we've just been lucky to have some good defensive line coaches. And again, props to Jessup and Jeff Traylor for making sure that a guy like Sadiq Haynes and Rod Wright was retained, and then you give off to Sadiq Haynes.
Right.
It felt kind of seamless. And then you have a guy like Nick Graham with the cornerbacks, him developing, Zay Frazier. It's, those are some of the coaches that when Traylor talks about we need to give pay raises to our assistants, those are the type of guys that immediately come to mind when you think about assistants, because I can imagine those guys are receiving some offers, especially finding diamonds in the rough and coaching them up.
And, we certainly have to call out Bryce Grays, even though, he's not a senior. Again, posted his first forced fumble of his career. It was recovered by Davin Martin. Once again, just a great play and a look at our future.
Right. And I think that's the important part is, usually you look for the seniors, but it's really cool when you see like one of the younger guys get a chance to make a play like that. All right. Let us get to the offense. Key to victory. I said attack the middle of Temple's defense with a run and pass, and I felt like they attempted to. I mean, rushing wise, they did, and they did a fairly good job of it. Passing wise, felt like Owen was off throughout the night, and it felt like they weren't able to really attack it as well as I would have liked. And I'm saying all this about Owen being off because it just felt like you had the target, but he threw the darts around the target this time, not like blatantly away or like hitting, not even close to the target whatsoever. So it's just that it was enough to, I think, cause some drops. I mean, that second interception where he threw to Patrick Overmeyer, we've seen him lay a pass right in the middle of the field like easily, and it just seems like he was just off.
Yeah.
Even that first interception to Chris Carpenter, it was behind Chris Carpenter a little bit, and you're asking Chris to kind of reach, and your momentum's going one way, and you have to like try to do something the other way. It's just not going to work out. All this to critique an offense that goes over 500 yards of offense for the second straight game, fourth time this year. Of course, the second straight game, because there's been some terrible defenses. Like let's not pat ourselves on the back too much. They're not great defenses, and they did put up 220 yards passing, 309 yards rushing. Be careful with that 309 yards rushing, though, Atos. We only rushed for 27 yards in the second half. So when you said earlier in this episode that they got within one score, this is why. Because rushed for 14 yards in the third quarter, rushed for 13 in the fourth quarter. You can't put teams away. And that's how Tulsa happens. And maybe that's where the sigh of relief was, is that you had a bad team that could have come back on you because you just can't run the ball and put this game away. Like it added to the weirdness. I wouldn't say actually added to the weirdness, because it's just been UTSA throughout the entire season.
Yeah. And it was interesting listening to Traylor today when they asked him about, why the success at rushing the ball. And, he mentioned the fact that we've had 5 consistent offensive linemen, true. He mentions, some of the things that the running backs are doing that are better than they were at the beginning of the season, and people are playing us differently. But the one thing he didn't mention was the fact that we have played probably 2 of the worst rush defenses these past 2 games, which you've got to contribute our success to their lack of success. That's a huge part of it as well. Not to diminish anything else that, he mentioned that is true. I mean, it is great having consistent offensive linemen, but that's not the only reason why. And, when we play a better rushing defense.
Like
The question is what's going to happen.
Yeah, like Army coming
Right.
up. That's going to be certainly a test. So if what he's saying is true, then we should see another good rushing game from UTSA if Army plays them the way that he says teams are now playing them. My guess right now is I don't know that that's necessarily true.
Yeah.
I think that that's just a way of covering up the fact that we just haven't had good offensive line play all season and cohesive offensive line play. One thing that was quiet this game was the tight ends.
Yeah, they really weren't as involved this game. You know, I think part of it was because we were so determined to run the ball, even when it wasn't working, that, you know, maybe that was part of it, that we just didn't have as many opportunities for passing. Because, I mean, Owen was 20 of 27 passing. So he only took 27 passing attempts, which is significantly lower than what we've seen these last couple of games.
Yeah, and you know, looking back at some stats, he's thrown, I think, for about 409 passing attempts this season to this point, 11 games in. That's a lot more than Frank Harris has in his career after 11 games. So we're asking our redshirt sophomore quarterback in his first season to come in and do something that even the best quarterback in UTSA history wasn't asked to do. A lot of it because Frank had a rushing game. So you see some of the struggles that this offense have had, hence why you've also had this weird game that we're talking about. But I'd be remiss if I couldn't bring up this 2 illegal formation penalties on Jalen Garth. Like Andre Ware for the second straight week talks about Jalen Garth and where he's lined up. Tobes, I'm beside myself. It's clear, and you know that the coaching staff has to tell Jalen, hey, look, this is what you're doing. You're tipping things.
Right.
To not have it cleaned up, once again, goes back to the things we've been talking about. We just can't clean up mistakes on the field. And it causes this offense to stall. Now, I've talked about how Owen's been able to overcome some of that adversity, but some way someone's going to see what Jalen Garth has been doing and be able to say, all right, they're going to just start calling out the plays from the sidelines.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you have the announcer calling it out for you, I'm sure that they've picked up on it.
Yeah. Well, let me give you some stats real quick that popped to me. A senior, Robert Henry, that we talked about earlier. He ended with 16 carries for 178 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 catch for 2 yards. The other guy that just continues to pop, and maybe why the tight ends really haven't been seeing as much action at times, has been David Amador. 7 catches for 63 yards. I think looking back at Robert Henry, you know, we had that moment, obviously, that we talked about, you know, with North Texas where, you know, he came running straight at us. I talked about the moment from this past game where he had that moment with the little boy. But to see him kind of, and again, I know it's some bad rush defenses, but to see him actually show and pop off some really long runs, you forget just how explosive he really is.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely got to see his speed, and I think that's the thing that's been lacking. You know, we knew that Robert Henry had jets. We just didn't get to see it as much this season.
Yeah, fair enough.
Let's talk about some records on the offensive side, because, again, it was a record-setting night, even if it was a little odd. Owen had that 75-yard run that we talked about. It eclipsed Frank Harris's record-setting touchdown run, which was 71 yards against North Texas back in 2020. I don't think any one of us thought we would be sitting here talking about Owen breaking Frank Harris's rushing records. I mean, I think passing, sure.
That's fair. No, that's fair.
But the fact that we're talking about Owen rushing for more yards than Frank Harris and a touchdown, I mean, I think that's just crazy. You know, but one of the things that also kind of came along with that, and Owen talked about it in his post-game press conference, was there was this underrated moment by Chris Carpenter. And for as much as we've been critical of Chris Carpenter in this game because of the punt, because of the interception, you know, you got to give him, you know, his kudos as well, because he had a really great block that allowed Owen to continue that run and score. And then, you know, we mentioned Robert Henry's 88-yard run again, but that was the second longest rush in school history behind Jarvian Williams' 92 dash against Southern Miss back in October of 2016. I mean, I think the other thing that's like crazy about these records that we're talking about outside of the 2020 run from Frank Harris, these are things that have been on the record books for a very long time. I mean, the fact that it took until Robert Henry to break a record set by Jarvion Williams, that's just crazy.
Well, even just take a second and just look at the difference between Jarvion and Robert Henry. I mean, just the level of running back we have now. Not again, not diminishing Jarvion, but back then we were just happy to have a pretty good running back.
Right.
Now we have so many running backs in the backfield that we're like, Robert Henry's only going to get this many touches, right? Like,
right.
he's got to make the most out of them. So just actually also seeing the journey. I mean, even looking back at some of those defensive records that you were talking about, just wow, right?
Yeah. And Robert Henry's performance this game earned him American Conference Honorable Mention Player of the Week.
Nice.
One of the other seniors, though, that had, a special moment was Willie McCoy. He scored a touchdown as well, right in front of us, got that, on film. So it was pretty exciting to see him, have a great moment as well.
Back-to-back passes there. He had a huge pass that set up that short touchdown pass grab. And that touchdown grab was perfect. Just back shoulder touchdown grab. So,
but before we move on, I have to bring this up. So during the Memphis game, there was this graphic, and I'm sure they got the graphic from UTSA. I can't imagine that ESPN just pulled it out of nowhere. And it listed the 12 guys that we've heard about multiple times. There are 12 guys that are out for the season. One of the names of those players was Justin Rodriguez. It said he was out for the season. So imagine my surprise when I look up from the touchdown club and all of a sudden I see Justin Rodriguez carrying the ball in the second half. Like, did he have a miraculous recovery? Or was that graphic an exaggeration or wrong or what? I mean, I'm just hoping it was a miraculous recovery, but I definitely had to do a double take when I saw J-Rod out there.
First of all, J-Rod, nice little kickoff return because they were trying to keep it away from Chris Carpenter, another senior. But yeah, for J-Rod, I mean, trailer's going to trailer, right? Like, trailer be trailering it. So, yeah.
And since then, he's mentioned 12 guys out for the season. I'm like, who's the 12th guy? Did we just switch out Jaron Randall, who you said was going to come back, for J-Rod? I don't know. But...
So you're saying he doesn't even know who's going to be out for the season?
Maybe, apparently not, because Justin Rodriguez was on the field.
Okay, well, as much as we've talked about who is and who is not on the injured list, let's move on to Army and do our preview. Army opened as a 8-point favorite at home. One thing I want to emphasize is the game conditions on Saturday. It's expected to be 39-degree temp at kickoff with an 11 to 13 mile per hour wind throughout the game.
Oof, I'm definitely glad that we will not be attending in person this year.
But it'd be so picturesque, right? Like it's New York. It's we could have seen snow or no.
Yeah, I just don't want to sit outside in 39-degree weather. That's the advantage of being in the dome.
We were at the 2013 North Texas game, and so I think that's the coldest we're gonna ever want to be, right?
Yeah, I'm good.
So this is the fifth time we're gonna play Army. They lead the series 3-1. Each time the home team has lost. Because our only win was back in 2022 when we went to that game,
right?
And saw our UTSA team win in overtime. That was a fun game. There was a lot of good things that I think I saw from that UTSA team to get the only win against Army. But before we go on, I want to make sure that I emphasize something as we talk about everything. Is I don't want to make fun of Army's schedule at all. There's I think our schedule can be laughable at times. I mean, go back to some of our past non-conference opponents, and sure, Army has 2 FCS teams that they would schedule every single year, but they were also independents. Now they're part of a conference. So to see how they're going to continue to evolve as they move forward, that'll get interesting. But, here we are. We've had 4 non-conference games, and at times those non-conference games. I mean, even this year, which one is the marquee one? Was it Texas State? I mean, obviously we had Texas, which we weren't gonna
Right.
beat. Army had Notre Dame; they weren't gonna beat them. So I don't know. I mean, it just. I think we need to look at ourselves first before we start pointing the finger ever about laughing about a schedule.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you look at Army's conference schedule, it's very similar to us, but they took care of business.
Well said. Let's get to the offense. There is a lot here as I start going through some of these stats that are interesting because it's going to be interesting battles. Each side having like being ranked high in the nation in one area, and so is the other team. So these battles are going to get really, really interesting. So offensively, Army is ranked 53rd in the nation at 401.2 yards per game. They're 6th in conference at 441.7. That rush offense, which obviously we know that they run the ball, is ranked first overall in the nation with 322.1 yards per game. They run for 347.4 yards per game in conference. You see that jump that just went up about 20 yards?
Yep.
They're going to take on the 9th ranked UTSA rush defense at 100.5 yards per game. What a battle. We kind of hinted at it, a couple weeks ago about can this UTSA rush defense, that was ranked 4th at the time, can it, how's it going to hold up against Army when Army's ranked first? Like, we're seeing some things butting heads here. They score about 33.1 points per game. Our defense gives up 31.6 points per game. I mean, I don't know, but the most important part I think about their offense, they don't turn the ball over.
Right.
They have only lost the ball 4 times, 3 fumbles and 1 interception. But I want to talk real quick about conversions because I think this is where you're going to see this Army offense and UTSA defense really match wits. Army, 51.3% third down conversion ranking is ranked 4th in the nation. It's going up against the 5th ranked third down defense of UTSA at 28.8%. It doesn't stop there, Tovs. 73.9% 4th down conversion ranking 7th for Army versus the 2nd ranked 4th down defense in the nation of UTSA at 29.2%. UTSA gets opponents off the field. Army loves to stay on the field, and they're showing that they're very good at it. How is UTSA going to be able to get off the field? Because that's going to be important. Right. That's going to tell you everything about this game. The other thing that'll tell you a little bit about this game is that red zone offense. It's 92.5% conversion, getting a score for Army. It ranks 9th in the nation against the 23rd ranked red zone defense. Atos, I'm pumped just seeing at these little stats. And it's not just because I'm a numbers guy, but it's because I really am looking forward to seeing Army's offense go up against our defense.
Right.
And, can Jesslep conjure up some defensive set to figure out how he can solve this Army rushing offense?
Yeah, and I think it's in particular given the fact that we didn't see the defensive performance that we expected to last year in the Dome. I think it'll be interesting to see what they can do on the road.
Yeah, you're right. It's just gonna be so much fun. All right, some key players here. It all starts with Bryson Daly, senior quarterback. Look, I've heard him described as a fullback or linebacker playing quarterback. Big dude, just you want to talk about toughness? It's Bryson Daly.
Yep.
He's their leading rusher with 1,207 yards for about a 5.7 average carry. He scored 23 touchdowns from. He's passed for 670 yards, albeit on 59 pass attempts, 33 completions. They've gone back from being in that shotgun offense that the two of us talked about last year in our preview. They've gone back to just bully ball, essentially, with that option offense that they have. He's thrown 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. That 1 interception was against North Texas.
And they didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. Sure. Look, based on the stuff we saw last season with him in the sort of shotgun offense, he improved his passing this season. But I still feel like it's still like a below average, passing, attack. It's not something that they're. I mean, they tried to embrace it last year. It didn't really work out for them, so they've gone back to what works for them.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned that Bryson Daly's been described as a fullback or a linebacker playing quarterback. Well, there's a reason for that. It's because he's not as talented or naturally talented of a passer. If you were looking at him being recruited to some of these other FBS programs, he wouldn't be a quarterback. They would be looking to put him in a different role. But with Army, he can play the position of quarterback because they just have a different style. It's all about, rushing the ball. It's all about handing it off. He's going to be asked to throw, but only on occasion. So, it works for Army, but, if you were to pick him up and put him into countless other FBS programs, even where they are run heavy, he probably would not be successful.
Very good point. And last season, in the Dome, he rushed for 100 yards and a touchdown, and he was 7 for 17, 133 yards for a touchdown. Certainly some numbers for you to think about as the game goes on.
Yeah, I mean,
if he gets to those levels.
Yeah, as much as we talk about the fact that he's not a great passer, that doesn't mean that he can't pass, and it doesn't mean that he can't burn us, because we certainly saw that last season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, let's get to Kanye Udo. He's their top running back. He's got rushed for 891 yards, 6.5 average, 9 touchdowns. Last year, he only rushed once, so nothing from him, but he has been a nice, tough runner for them. I like the way that they kind of use him to balance off of. Normally, you find like a wide receiver that kind of complements that quarterback well. I feel like Udo just complements Bryson Daly really well. Let's get to Noah Short, running back. He was actually more of a receiver last year as opposed to being a running back. He's rushed for 437 yards, 10.2 yard average. Almost a first down every single time he rushes the ball, I should say.
Wow.
2 touchdowns. But again, like I said, he's a receiver. He's caught 13 passes for 270 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's their third rusher, second receiver. Again, nice little compliment that Jeff Monken has brought in for Bryson Daly, kind of put another tool around him. Last season, Noah Short, 3 receptions, 68 yards, a touchdown. He burned us. When you were talking about, hey, we've seen that Bryson Daly can beat us. Yeah, him and Noah Short beat us. Something to look out for. Their top receiver, and I say top receiver because he is really the only receiver that has really garnered a lot of attention. Casey Reynolds, wide receiver, senior. He's got 13 passes for 336 yards, 3 touchdowns. Last season, he caught 1 pass for 11 yards against us. The one thing to watch out for with these wide receivers that they're always going to be good at, much like at UTSA, it's going to be very good run blockers. That's where they're going to open up a lot of the holes. That's how they're going to put UTSA's defense in a bad position. Let's get to the Army defense now. They are ranked 10th in the nation, allowing 292.7 yards per game. It drops by 10 yards per game in conference, as they're second in conference at 282 yards per game. I would love to say that UTSA's rush offense was terrific, but as we talked about, it's 65th ranked at 164.2 yards per game. It's gone up 32 yards because of the 300-yard gains we had against North Texas and Temple. So don't let it fool you guys thinking that the rushing game was fixed. We talked about it last week that the rushing game was not fixed. This Army rush defense is ranked 10th, allowing 101.6 yards per game. They do not let people run on them. This Army pass defense is ranked 32nd in the nation, allowing 191.1 yards per game. They're going up against the Owen McCown-led UTSA pass offense that's ranked 10th in the nation at 292.9 yards per game. I told you there's some things like just some strengths going up against strengths, and this is going to be a fun matchup to see these two now AAC teams going up against each other. One of the things, though, that Army doesn't do as well, though, I think, in my opinion, is that they don't really cause a lot of turnovers. So 76 in the nation, all of them are interceptions, 14, all takeaways. All right, we'll talk about some key players. Andon Thomas, linebacker. He's a leading tackler at 61 tackles. Elo Madozi, sophomore linebacker. He leads the team in sacks at 4.5 sacks. A lot of their linebackers lead in sacks. So you can see that they're going to have attacking linebackers going to come after Owen McCown. So it's going to be imperative that, our two tackles, Kamar Missouri and Jalen Garth, are up for the challenge of some of these, Army linebackers blitzing in or coming in. That doesn't mean that the rest of the line can just take a break, but it's the edge where these guys are going to be coming from. Have to mention Max DiDomenico. He's a strong safety guy from the San Antonio area. He's got 44 tackles, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups on the year. This guy's going to want to play well against a team that he's from the area that he's from.
Right.
Let's talk special teams.
Yeah, and special teams, and we can talk about their kicker and their punter, but the honest truth is that we probably aren't going to see these guys very often because Army goes for it on 4th down so much. You typically don't see them punt, and you typically don't see them kick field goals very often. Their senior kicker, Trey Garant, is 100% on field goals this year, but he's only made 5 attempts. He has a long of 35, so again, not really like a significant range, but when you're not necessarily going for field goals very often, he's probably not really being asked to do a lot.
And with the conditions on Saturday, that could factor into it too. So
Sure.
Good point there, Datos.
Punting, they have a sophomore, James Wagenseller. He's averaging about 41.76. But again, Army has been very successful on their drives, and so you really haven't seen a lot of punting, on their part. So, hopefully we'll see these two in this game more than perhaps some of our competitors have. But again, it's not that likely.
All right, let's get to the keys to victory then. On offense, we got to be patient on offense. Why? In 2023, we had 360 total yards, 1535 in time of possession, and we were 4 of 10 on 3rd down. In our only win against Army at West Point, we had 512 total yards, almost 28 minutes of time of possession. And we were 11 of 15 on 3rd down. If we can't extend drives, if we can't be patient, and we just take those big plays, we saw what happened last season. We'll give them a run, right? But it's not going to be enough.
And we saw what happened with North Texas when they were trying to force because the time of possession was so low.
Right.
Granted, we were more successful in the Dome in 2023 than North Texas was, but it was kind of that same thing again. You get into those positions where you're panicking on offense and you don't make good decisions at that time.
I think it's going to be key. Again, this is the chess match that I think we have to watch out for. On defense, I've said it so many times about this Army offense, but you got to limit your over pursuit on the ball carriers. They do a very good job of having defenders take bad angles at them to tackle them. And if you're doing that, it's not going to be a recipe for success. But biggest key to victory, I think, on defense is this. I want to see UTSA stack the line. Why? Because I want to force Bryson Daly to beat us through the air. I told you, Atos, at the beginning of this preview that there's going to be windy conditions. We talked about during the offensive portion of it that he doesn't have the greatest of arms. Mm-hmm. I want to see him go up against Denver Harris and Zay Frazier and beat them. I know your wide receivers can't beat our guys one-on-one, so I want to see you forced to make that big throw.
Right.
I get that he's probably going to be throwing a lot to a running back coming out of the backfield, which means that our linebackers also have to be careful. Our safeties are going to have to be careful. But to me, we've got to stack that line and say, Bryson Daly, you beat us through the air. Just like they did in 2022 when we beat them because we forced them to pass all the time.
Right.
All right, let's get to our Hail Mary predictions.
Look, despite their loss at Notre Dame, Army is still a very good football team. Unlike UTSA, they are extremely disciplined. They're coming off of a tough loss. They're going to want to bounce back for senior day. And they're going to want to ensure that they have home field advantage in the conference championship game. And to do that, they need to be ranked higher than Tulane. I just think that this is going to be a really tough team. We have not played well on the road. I do think we'll play better, but I still see Army coming out with a win at the end. So give me Army 28-17 over UTSA.
A tough matchup for the last regular season game. We talked about it way back last spring about having to play at Army. We've talked about what those challenges could be. Now we have those challenges, the weather. We have the talent to beat Army, but have never had that discipline to do so, even though we have beaten them once. Can this defense recall the 2022 UTSA defense at West Point? I don't think they can. But if they do, I'm going to be so encouraged, especially if they follow my recipes for victory. UTSA has not been winless on the road since 2011, the inaugural season when they were 0-4. My heart says a win, but my head says we go winless on the road. Give me Army 34-24 over UTSA in the elements.
Before we go, I have to give a shout out to my Tarleton Texans, who earned their first FCS playoff appearance in the first year that they were eligible for postseason play. They're a 13 seed, and they're going to be hosting Drake in the first round of the playoffs on Saturday, 2 p.m. on ESPN+. So if the Army game goes badly, you got something to switch over and watch. Hopefully will be a win.
Hate the Drake. Gotta hate the Drake.
Hate the Drake.
The UTSA women's basketball team beat Texas A&M Corpus Christi 62-43, making them 4-1 on the season. It's their best start since 2007 when they began 5-0. Atov's that Texas A&M Corpus Christi team was very good. They were, obviously we talked about the fact that they had beaten A&M to start their season off. This Islanders team has just been very good throughout the last few seasons, and it was just encouraging to see our lady runners essentially, step up to them and shut them down in that second half, because that first half it was A&M Corpus Christi was up by 1, and then UTSA just decided we're not having this anymore. We're putting the clamps on you, and
they only scored 12 points in the second half.
Yeah.
I mean, just absolutely incredibly dominant defensive showing that second half. And we know Coach Aston loves to play defense. That's her thing. That's where she considers her strength. So, she was just absolutely thrilled.
Well, and it just shows the way she's brought those players, right? We talked about in our preview how you have all these players that she's recruited that are just clogging up the passing lanes, that are just kind of taller and lankier than they've had before. And this is the type of win that you want to build off of, because you shut a team down by using your defense, and it created easy offensive opportunities.
Absolutely. So in other news in the American Conference, ECU beat North Texas 40-28. There was just a colossal collapse by North Texas in the second half. They were leading the game 21-7 at halftime, and then they managed to lose 40-28. That was their opportunity to get to bowl eligibility, but now they're going to have to wait and see if they can beat Temple.
It was the middle 8. You've talked about it and harped on it with UTSA. They allowed East Carolina to score a touchdown right before halftime. It was pure just muscle, physical rushing game by Rajay Harris from ECU. He gets that touchdown. They go in 21-7, and then East Carolina keeps rolling. And it couldn't happen to a better school. I'm so happy for North Texas that this happened to them. I can't express how thrilled I am as I
that
say
they
this.
also lost to East Carolina.
I got the biggest smile
home.
on my face.
South Florida annihilated Tulsa 63-30. And on Sunday, Tulsa had fired head coach Kevin Wilson.
I was surprised. Honestly, I mean, I know that things are, weren't going well for Kevin Wilson in his second season. We outlined why they hadn't been going well. I mean, they beat UTSA. They came back and
Yeah.
so I didn't think that this would lead to this. But what I have noticed is that every single coach that's been fired by an AAC program seems to have the same message. I'm telling you, you can't tell me that every single one of these programs is going to be coming out and saying, we believe we should be, going to bowl games. We should believe we should be going to conference titles. We should be challenging for all that. That's Tim Pernetti. I'm telling you, Tim Pernetti has something behind this.
Probably.
At this point, and someone can prove me wrong. I'm just saying, I really feel like Pernetti did a little tour and said, hey,
All my underachieving
yeah,
teams here. You gotta.
and this is what you're going to say when
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, he wants this conference to be the premier G5 conference, and we're not
Right.
going to do it with the performances that we've seen from some of
Right.
these schools this season.
Right.
Speaking of two of those schools, UAB beat up on Rice 40-14.
Put the fork in both of them because they're done,
Yeah.
man.
Well, Rice has already recognized that. We just need UAB too. Charlotte took care of FAU 39-27.
Oh, Biff, where are you? If only Biff was still there. No, it did.
No.
It's good to see Charlotte get in there and play well after firing Biff Poggi.
They had a really great moment that was circulating on the internet from Purdy, who's a quarterback at Charlotte, talking about, I guess, this sort of gamble that they took on 4th and 7 at one point and the pressure that they put on him. And it was just a very mature interview from this true freshman talking about, hey, I signed up for this pressure, and this is what we did. And I knew we were going to be successful. And, it's just kind of a shame that we didn't get to see kind of a longer runway from him because I think, who knows where he's going to end up, but he seems like he has some potential and maybe with a better coaching staff, you'll be able to see some success from him in the future.
Well, on that, let's do a quick update on the coaching hires. East Carolina promoted their interim coach, Blake Harrell, to head coach. So good to see them, recognize that Blake Harrell was the guy.
Yeah. Well, they probably said, hey, you beat North Texas, so there you go.
That
You got the
comeback,
job.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they perform well, and I think, you see how he does in the next couple seasons. I mean, if you do an interim, I don't see why you have to go long term. You could go like 2 or 3 years and then just say, we'll see where you're at after, year 3 or something. So that just leaves the head coaching positions in the an American Conference as still being open. Rice, Charlotte, Tulsa, FAU, Temple, and UAB.
All right. Well, let's be honest. UAB is not quite there yet. They should be, but they have not gotten there yet.
No, UAB's open. Like, there's no way they're bringing back. They can't bring back Dilfer. I mean, Tim Pernetti has to be calling them, going, "You got to be kidding me." Aside from that, I think you're going to see more AAC teams make hires in the next week or so. Early signing day period is coming up.
Right.
You've got to, and a lot of these ADs have come out and have made reference to that, especially Arthur Johnson, I believe, is the guy, the Temple AD, who unfortunately had his interview with ESPN announcers on Friday cut short as Owen McCown started scrambling for a 75-yard touchdown behind him.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen that, you have to, because it's one of the saddest yet funniest things that I think has ever happened in college football.
In bowl prediction news, there are now 77 teams who have obtained bowl eligibility. There are only 82 slots available. There will definitely be 2 more teams that are 5-win teams that are going to become bowl eligible this weekend because in 2 games, there are 5-5 teams playing each other. So one person is going to win, or one team is going to win one of those games. So each of those games. So there will definitely be 79 teams that are bowl eligible for 82 slots on Saturday, but there are 14 other teams that have the opportunity to gain eligibility this weekend. So the likely situation is that there may be a few teams that get left at home. It's unfortunate when you get to that 6 win, and you're super excited about bowl eligibility, but some years that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go bowling. So I think it'll be interesting to see, who gets left out on Selection Sunday if that's the situation that we end up facing. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us. Thanks for joining us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm A Toves.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back soon to recap our game against Army.
Birds up.